So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everyone, today we're going to continue the ayat that we were doing. Of course, we are in Surah Nisa. You could see it right here on the top of the page, and it is still al-Juz al-Khamis. So, we've actually been doing pretty well in passing our ayat, alhamdulillah. And of course, we went in lots of details in regards what makes لعنة نسأل الله العفو والعافية and what actually protects us from la'na, and we went in details in that regards. And we also mentioned the part we left off right here, and we mentioned the part about the people of Quraysh and also the Jews that were in Medina creating alliances and, of course, creating a narrative to stereotype the Muslims within the Arabian Peninsula, and certainly these stereotypical images have definitely surpassed the Arabian Peninsula and probably, I would say, perpetrated the minds of so many of the minds in the media, through schools, etc. So really, nothing is new. So this, subhanallah, is really how the history of all the prophets had really started out with. It was always portraying the Muslims, portraying the um, prophets' followers, and certainly portraying the Salihin as the ones to be evil, as the ones to bring about injustice. And the most quote that I like in terms of the way that was portraying how, yes, they wanted to put themselves as the people that were supporting and proselytizing justice, and that those that were the followers, the prophet's followers were nothing but the evildoers, is really the quote that Fir'aun said. And he said, إني أخاف أن يبدل دينكم أو أن يظهر في الأرض الفساد. So this is the Pharaoh actually talking about Prophet Musa. And he says, I fear that he will change your principle, change your religion, or he might expose and create some evil doings within the community, or in other words, to bring about chaos on earth. And it's really funny coming out of the Pharaoh who was actually killing children, who was enslaving Bani Israel, who was raping women, who was committing all these, who was even married to his own, and of course, while he was actually committing incest. So, in fact, all of his lineage was actually nothing but incest upon incest. And when you look at Pharaoh, you hear at him saying that he's a person that is the one to want to guard justice, guard morality, and guard principle. You're looking at what? And same thing, the irony, even during Qawm Lut, and you would see that the people of Qawm Lut, they basically said that the reason why they wanted to expel Prophet Lut and his family, except his wife, was because they saw that he was seeking purification. In other words, seeking purification was actually considered by them as nothing but a disgusting act that should be certainly expelled out and isolated, and certainly to quote unquote cleanse the society from such a contamination. And you'll be like, what is going on? How do these people actually see the total opposite? And it's strange how, subhanAllah, these sins can actually make these people see everything shifted. And this is extremely important. You see, your vision has a lot to do with the way that you practice things. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling you, well, it's not enough for you to see how you feel about something, because you can go in a delusion that will take you elsewhere. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, actually said, you would not be a believer حتى يكون هواه تبعا لما جئت به, until your own hawa, your own feelings, your own lust, your own pleasure, your own desire actually goes in parallel with what the Prophet ﷺ had come with, i.e., the revelation or al-wahi. Now, that's extremely important to keep in mind, because we can go in a delusion, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ had actually drawn a line. Let's put that forward right there. And so he draws a line. Sorry, you could see, and maybe I could, I don't know. All right, so let's see. I hope I can make a better line than this. But he draws a straight line. Let's see. Hopefully we can actually get this straight line. Okay, I'm trying. This is supposed to be a straight line. Okay, and then he draws lines all the way. Oh man, this is horrible. Sorry, let me take that back. You could clearly see I'm not doing so well on this. All right, so he draws a straight line, and after he draws a straight line, then he draws all these different lines right next to that straight line, and he says, this is the line that is the straight line, is the line to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all the other lines are basically lines that lead to the path of shaitan. And this is extremely important, because there's only one truth. Even if you decided to make so many narratives, there's only one truth. But there's so many roads and so many narratives to falsehood. And of course, throughout history, people will create narratives, people will create delusions, people will be capable and are capable of self manipulation without them knowing, that's actually leading them not to Jannah, but to hellfire. And which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically tells us right there, أولئك الذين لعنهم الله. Those are the people that were expelled and that are expelled from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. And we talked about the la'n. We're not going to go in detail. وَمَن يَلْعَنِ اللَّهُ فَلَن تَجِدَ لَهُ نَصِيرًا. So what does it mean? So semicolon right there. So what does it mean to actually be cursed or be excluded from the mercy of the Lord Almighty? So here, basically giving you that definition and telling you, well, that would actually entail that the person would not find any support in their provision, support in their health, support in their wealth, support in their life, support in their decision making, support in not only in this life, but also in the hereafter. And what is worse, Nasallahu al-afwa wal-afiyah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from all of this. What is worse than actually being left to do all the different problems and all the different decision makings and all the different choices on your own? And that's why, as a Muslim, we would make the dua, Ya Allah, do not make me responsible for my matters, not even with a blink of an eye. Not even with a blink of an eye, because imagine if you were going to be responsible to make the decision, and of course your eyes blink, of course, voluntarily. No, you can't control it. Okay. You blink your eyes and they blink on their own, all right, involuntarily, okay? And therefore, imagine you were going to be responsible for that. Imagine the amount of anxiety you were going to get into if you were the one that was responsible for it. Let's continue. أم لهم نصيب من الملك فإذا لا يؤتون الناس نقيرا. Now here, أم لهم نصيب من الملك, what happened was is that, remember, what they were seeking is a privilege of authority, a privilege of perfecting their economy. And certainly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us, Am lahum, do they actually have any privilege of any type of authority? So il-mulk is not necessarily monarchy. Il-mulk could also be any type of authority. So whether that was an authority where, hey, where is your authority? If you really were in this type of authority, well, do you really recognize the most important authority that you should be considering is really the authority of the Lord Almighty, Allahu Akbar. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, if they were to have any authority, if they were to have any property, if they were to own some large amount of wealth, well, they would actually be so stingy, they would not even give people, not even the line, or even the line that is a part of a piece of date. Now, this is a metaphor. This is in order to say that even something so trivial, something so unrecognizable, the people, at least the Yahud in this context, or even those that would, if of course, when they're not living a principle, that actually means their principle is their own whims. And if their principle is their own whims, then in that situation, all they want to feed is really their own ego. And if they were the ones to be in control, then certainly they would not want to share not even something of what is considered probably the most trivial thing that you could have, which is probably the small lining or even a the small line at the back of the date. أم يحسدون الناس على ما آتاهم الله من فضله فقد آتينا آل إبراهيم الكتاب والحكمة وآتيناهم ملكا عظيما. So the context of this ayah, let me first explain what it's saying. Or do they envy the people and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted them from his blessings? And for we had already granted the family of Prophet Ibrahim the book, the wisdom, and we had given them a magnificent authority. What is the context of this ayah? So the context of this ayah within these ayat is that the Jews had actually rejected the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ because they considered that he wasn't from the children of Israel, and therefore there is no way that they could allow, that is, the children of Israel, at least the Jews that were living in Medina, there's no way that they could allow any privilege to be outside of the children of Israel. Therefore, Prophet Muhammad SAW, according to them, is to be rejected to make sure that they actually get the superpower, the super privilege, and certainly the ones to preserve their lineage from any other authority actually being granted to any group of people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, are they here envying? So يحسدون الناس is to actually speak about which nas here? Well, the nas here is really to speak about the one, the Quraysh, or even to speak about the Prophet ﷺ, of course, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted them min fadlih, that is the angel Jibreel coming on to the Prophet ﷺ to give him the revelation. فَقَدْ آتَيْنَا. In other words, there's nothing new about this because different prophets from different tribes, including Ibrahim himself, was not Bani Israel. He was basically the head of the whole lineage. So Ala Ibrahim, why is it talking about the family of Prophet Ibrahim? Because Prophet Ibrahim actually bore two sons, Ismail and Isaac, or Ishaq. So Prophet Ishaq is basically the father of the children of Israel, or later, of course, Yaqub alayhi salam, and then he fathers the children of Israel, considered at least a direct descendant. Prophet Ismail is actually considered fathering at least the other Semitics, and that is the Arabi lineage. And of course, in the Torah, it does actually go in details about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered Prophet Ibrahim to go to the land. Of course, this is in Genesis, to go to the land of, it calls it Becca, which is another name for Mecca as well. And according to Genesis, that is in order to make him a great nation. All right. So then, of course, the Kedars, who were actually the descendants of Prophet Ismail, they were the ones, the Kedars were the ones to later take over. And of course, according to Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verse 18, that the Lord Almighty would actually send a prophet from the Kedars, and who he will put his words in his mouth, and he will speak in the name of God. So at the end of the day, you could see that there were some, I would say, amazing signs, but then they basically wanted to reject that Prophet Muhammad SAW was at all going to be a prophet, or a prophet at all, because they considered that he's not from that lineage. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, we had granted Ibrahim al-kitab, al-hikmah, وَآتَيْنَهُ مُلْكًا عَظِيمًا. I want you to look at these 3 points. So you've got al-kitab, which basically is here referring to al-kitab, كتب صحف إبراهيم وموسى. So this is not referring to the Torah, but this is actually referring to a different scripture that Prophet Ibrahim had, which certainly we have no trace of, we don't know whatsoever about. We just know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent certain scripture to Prophet Ibrahim, but we have no access to whatsoever. And there's also the second piece, which is al-hikmah. So usually when you would see al-kitab and al-hikmah relates to wisdom in choices, wisdom in regulating principle, in regulating human action, which basically tells us that al-kitab itself contained certain things that related to aqidah, or at least understanding things about God Almighty. And it also contained another piece, which actually is legislature. In other words, very similar to what the Prophet ﷺ had come with, in where the Quran, out of the 6,236 ayahs, so if you were to subtract almost 350 to 700 ayat, which pretty much are exclusive to legislature, the other ayat would actually be more within creed, and emphasizing Islamic creed, emphasizing the creed, the relationship in the relationship between man and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I also would like to say there were some people questioning why were there some repetition, and I did mention that some of the repetition was one, in order to emphasize a certain idea, emphasize the importance of Tawheed or monotheism in Islam. There is clear emphasis, and definitely there is some repetition in order to emphasize the idea of Tawheed. To emphasis, not only emphasis, but there's also the different ways. So with repetition, the different ways to help teach the followers, those that are reading, seeing that particular center, looking at it from different angles, and certainly the application of it using different angles to recognize the application, because it's not enough to have a center pinpointed in one area. It's important to help the person, the followers, those that are reading the verses, actually understand how the center is actually involving, and of course, how we would implement it in the application or the implementation of such center onto the different circumstances, and how it actually leads to understanding Tawheed in three different areas: the area of knowing God Almighty, the area of worshiping God Almighty, and the area of understanding the encompassment of the Lord Almighty's powers and authority in all of those different areas. Now, the other reason why repetition is there is really for, let's call it, spiritual slash programming reasons, to help us set our mind, set our behavior, set our own dynamic within ourselves, how we would let that act as the area that directs our spirituality, directs our relationship with the kitab and al-hikmah. So there we go. That al-kitab right there would basically be the book, but this is not talking about any book, but this is talking about a particular book that was sent onto Prophet Ibrahim at least. And of course, al-hikmah would mean wisdom, but this is not talking about personal wisdom. This is actually referring and inferring that there was a legislature, a principle, a jurisdiction that was revealed onto Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. In other words, the guidance, or at least the regulations of Sharia, is nothing new. So to have a specific law to practice is nothing new, but this was also sent onto Prophet Ibrahim. This was sent onto different prophets as well, in where they contained different regulations, different obligations, what is prohibited and what is not, and how we would regulate our life in the social relations or even transactions in order to instill justice. And of course, the one to define justice is the Lord Almighty, which is what would be the other meaning, or what would be the word hikmah containing it. So when you look at the word hikmah, you're more understanding, speaking about justice. So hikmah is justice, and that's why you would see in other ayat where, when it would talk about the Torah and speaking about it as one kitab and al-hikmah, or when the Prophet ﷺ, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions that he had sent him that with the Quran وَمِثْلَهُ مَعَهُ, and also what is similar to it, meaning the sunnah, and same thing, calling that Quran or the sunnah as being al-hikmah. وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ مُلْكًا عَظِيمًا. Now, when you look at آتَيْنَاهُم, that they were granted mulkan azima. Now, mulk actually means here power. What does power have to do with any of this? So, because when you look at the scripture and when you look at the definitions of justice contained within, those are not to be somehow just ideas of inspiration, but they're actually areas to put as an implementation. And that's why he says, وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ مُلْكًا عَظِيمًا. And even though, wait a minute, آتَيْنَاهُم is supposed to be, the context is supposed to be آتَيْنَاهُ, speaking about Ibrahim. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not speaking about آتَيْنَاهُ as Prophet Ibrahim, because آتَيْنَاهُم is plural. If he were only talking about Prophet Ibrahim, well, from what we know is that Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was not necessarily the leader of any political power. And certainly we know that Prophet Ibrahim did not actually have the power to build a nation. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, آتَيْنَاهُمْ. So, آتَيْنَاهُمْ مُلْكًا عَظِيمًا. That would actually speak about the different children of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam that did actually live up to being major leaders. In fact, not only leaders, but actually being in power, in magnificent power, like Prophet Sulaiman, which the Jews would actually consider, the Jews and the Christians would consider him not a prophet, but would consider him just a great king. And same thing with Prophet Dawood, they would consider him the King David, but as Muslims, we would basically call them prophets. Okay, we would consider them prophets that actually ruled by the rule of the Lord Almighty. In other words, when we speak about one, the words of the Lord Almighty, it's not enough to just think that they are words to be confined as intelligent, wise words to be confined within a masjid, within a spiritual area, but they're actually words that are supposed to be seeking ways and seeking all the highest levels in power as well. And certainly, this is in our day and age something that is permitted to say. If you're talking about democracy, you're talking about lobbies, it's permissible to say. But the second that you say Sharia law, having the right or that within it, it also seeks to be in place of power, that's when you would have all the media and certainly all those different, what is the word that I could use? I don't know what word I could use, but then there are different accusations that you are pushing towards terror. And it's really funny how they would give themselves the jurisdiction and the right to actually say, yes, we as a lobby have the right to define justice, define morality, define all these different things, and even go as far as indoctrinating the children, indoctrinating schools, and certainly controlling the system left and right, and even controlling the system as who gets the job and who doesn't get the job and all of that. But then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or when Islam says, well, we've got our definition in where, inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how we would preserve people's religion, preserve people's lives, preserve people's mental health, preserve people's family, and certainly preserve people's property. And then you would see all those attacks ready coming at you to tell you, no, you do not. And therefore, the second that you would say that, you will be accused of somehow being or having the quote unquote audacity to stand up to speak about Islam. And of course, you will be accused of somehow proselytizing for terror, and then you will find yourself nowhere but in Guantanamo without you realizing. This is not new. All right, let's continue before they take down our video. فمنهم من آمن به ومنهم من صد عنه وكفى بجهنم سعيرا. Let's look at this ayah. So from them, or some of them, they had believed in it, and some of them had actually turned people away from it. And it is enough in Jahannam to see a blazing fire coming at them. Wait, how did we get there? Let's say. So فَمِنْهُمْ from them, who is it actually, this pronoun, who's it referring to? Remember, it's actually talking about those that are الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا نَصِيبًا مِنَ الْكِتَابِ. So the context is, it's talking about those that were granted a portion of the book, of the revelation, which really are the Jews. But again, right there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, some of them did embrace the words of the Lord Almighty, and others, on the other hand, they had actually turned people away from the word. In other words, it's not enough to be identified as part of a particular group if your actions are speaking otherwise. Because in order to be part of a particular group, and here the group that we're talking about is whether it's Ali Ibrahim or the followers of Prophet Ibrahim or the followers of truth, that would actually mean that you would have have done two things. Number one, yes, believe in the scripture, and two, to bring and invite others to recognize truth. It's not enough to actually say, well, I believe in it and I'll just let my religion be a personal thing. Your religion is, yes, supposed to be that, just like in Surah Al-Kafirun, قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم. Yes, in where it says, oh, you who disbelieve, لا أعبد ما تعبدون قل يا أيها الكافرون, I don't believe in what you believe in. You don't believe in what I believe in. So allow me to get my personal space to practice the religion as into what I believe in. And this is the thing, is that in Islam, because you believe right there in Islam, you cannot contradict yourself. Islam tells you, you carry on a prophet's mission, where the Prophet ﷺ actually said, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. What is بَلِّغُوا? بَلِّغُوا actually means inform about me or inform the truth, proselytize, teach others about it, and teach others about the Prophet's mission and what they had actually come with, even if you only knew one verse. Don't stay quiet about it. In other words, bring in your religious confidence, your identity, to really embrace the Prophet's identity. What is the Prophet's identity? The Prophet's identity was a man that got the revelation and also his mission, and that is the second identity, which is to deliver a mission, which is to actually inform others about the truth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent. وَكَفَى بِجَهَنَّمَ سَعِيرًا. In other words, Jahannam would actually be the result of those that, one, did not believe, or those that had actually expelled people away from truth. How do people expel people away? One, there could be a method where you're silent about it. That's basically turning people away from it. Two, it could be that you are also involved in supporting the other groups, whether, of course, in money, financing, or even when we're talking about media, or even adopting and proselytizing the other ideas that are far away and certainly distanced from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed. وَكَفَى بِجَهَنَّمَ سَعِيرًا. Isn't that a form of brainwashing? Someone might ask, why is it constantly telling us that there is going to be a punishment? Why can't religion just speak of being nice and just speak of sending peace and love to people? Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created the world. And what we see in nature and what we see in the world is that everything is within a certain order. The second you go against the order of the Lord Almighty, whether that was in your health or whether that was in the structure of, even if it's man-made structure, it would mean that it's taken you to chaos. And that's why if you were to not eat right, you're going to find yourself really struggling with probably obesity or probably high blood pressure, sugar levels, etc. And if, for example, you're not studying, you're going to find yourself really not finding a good job or probably getting good grades, and eventually you're going to find yourself at the other side of probably failure than actually success. Same thing if you were to, hey, you don't want to put an effort to work out, you don't want to put an effort to probably get a job, you're going to find yourself really homeless, you're going to find yourself not putting the energy in what would bring you a good result is really the same law that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically told you to see the world around you. And through seeing the world around you, it's to help you recognize, that even the purpose preceded your existence is really determined by Allah Almighty. Brainwashing would be if the person were to manipulate you in a certain practice. In other words, manipulate you in a certain practice, in a certain idea that is actually not reality. That's brainwashing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually speaking to you of reality and told you, listen, you were created to be tested. The test is how you apply the principle of the Lord Almighty. If you choose not to take the test, then you had determined yourself to actually getting into the consequence of turning away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and basically not using the different privileges that you were granted and certainly the different tools that you were granted for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you have no way of running away and thinking, well, how did I get involved into this? I didn't choose this. Is it really true? Did we choose it? Well, according to the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ قَالُوا بَلَى. What is that ayah saying? When your Lord Almighty took from the backs of the children of Adam, or took the backs from the back of Adam, the children, and he made them witnesses upon themselves, am I not your Lord? And they said, verily, but on judgment day they will come and say, we were pacified away from recognizing this. In other words, we didn't recognize it. It was something that we totally forgot about, which is al-amana. We're going to talk about al-amana, or the trust, once we get to this right there, and to addul amanati ila ahliha, we're going to get to it. But when we're speaking about this portion of it, you might say, well, I don't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking to me and asking me whether I want to be part of all of this or not, and whether I even wanted to live, and whether I actually want to be tested to go to Jannah or hellfire. I don't remember any of this. Number one, when you speak about memory, to consider memory as exclusive to what your mind can remember, in other words, the information, the data that is collected in your mind, is actually containing a lot of fault, because memory is a lot more extensive than what your brain remembers in terms of incidents or information. In other words, your cognitive or intellectual memory. What does that mean? Your memory extends farther than the moment that you were capable of giving information. Your memory actually extends farther in where your memory, what you don't know about yourself, actually goes through your DNA. Your DNA has some data that your brain, or at least the time that you were capable of understanding and processing information, guess what? Your body stored information farther than what your mind was capable of understanding. So the information stored in you, whether we're talking about genetics, your information about what is stored about you, about probably the diseases that you carry from your ancestors, the color of your eyes, the color of the shape of your body, the shape of the different stored information in your DNA, which you have no information about, is actually stored from generations and generations, in where you could actually know some of their lineage probably dating as far back as 700 and 800 or even more years back. You don't know any of this information, but guess what? The data is stored within you. Now, this is what we know of now. Who knows what science will then tell us about stored information that we don't know of relating to, do we actually have any stored information about God? Well, that's for science to study. But I don't know where that study went into, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, you do actually have stored information within you about God, and this is what Islam calls al-fitra. Al-fitra to mean instinct. In other words, there's stored information within your fitra, within your DNA, within your creation regarding that you would turn to some super power, some being to worship, and that you recognize that this being is actually the one that you should have turned to in worship, that you should have turned to, or you should turn to in recognizing that he is the superpower when you're weak, when you're feeling vulnerable, that you would turn to your Lord Almighty. But what happened to this data that is stored within us? Why don't we feel it? Why don't we recognize it? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then tells you, well, what happened is that they had said we were just ghafilin. I want you to look at the word ghafilin, because the word ghafla would simply mean that the person was going through some form of getting pacified. So instead of recognizing certain things, it's exactly like giving a child a pacifier, in where you're trying to get them their bottle ready, but you give them a pacifier. And of course, it's not feeding their hunger, but they're just basically using that pacifier, or you're using the pacifier to kind of get them into feeling some form of, yes, I'm working on feeding my hunger, but the reality is that you're just really pacifying yourself. You're really not feeding yourself. And what we're seeing right now is, well, even not now only, but even historically speaking, is that people would use different methods to pacify themselves, whether it's seeking different ways to, for popularity, for, let's say, getting popular, getting famous, or probably wealth, or probably sex, or probably food, or the list goes on, in terms of finding entertainment through different areas, when in reality, the real feeding, the true happiness is really not in these materialistic things, but it's actually in your heart. It's actually in your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. Verily, by the remembrance of the Lord Almighty, that's where you would find that content. That's where you would find that dopamine. That's where you would find that ecstasy, the true ecstasy. All the other type of euphoria that you might be, or the ecstasy that you might be getting, is really nothing but a mirage, and nothing but some form of a pacifier, in where it will redirect your vision from focusing on what really feeds you to actually focusing on just putting the energy to chew on a pacifier and thinking that it's going to feed my hunger. It at least soothes my gums, soothes my mouth, and then without you recognizing, death is coming, and then you did not get the feeding, and you didn't even get, of course, the whole object of what you were created for. So the purpose of what you were created for was actually designed and certainly determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, where does that idea come from? Where do people get the idea that, hey, we're supposed to be here, considering that religion is just supposed to be a place of somehow spirituality, a place of just an area where we would engage in peaceful fantasy about nature and all of that. That actually comes from the whole idea of secularity. Secularism considers that religion is to be confined in an area where it does not relate to human practice. And therefore, anything that is related to religion, according to secularism, which really is the Sharia of atheism, that religion is not whatsoever in any authority to speak about morality, to speak about any form of jurisdiction, or to speak about in any way in regulating people's lives. Why? Because atheism regarded, which is, let's call it the creed of secularism, it actually regarded that religion is nothing but myth. Religion is myth, and therefore, when we're speaking about the world, atheism regards that we're just matter in motion. So when we're speaking about justice, it doesn't have a real objective, subjective reality on ground. If you manage to get away from the law and you manage to get away from the consequence of law in where you didn't implement justice, well, good for you. You got away with it and you got a privilege of getting away with it, which actually comes from the idea that you could see even in the Darwin's theory, in where the real winners are really those that would struggle for survival, and of course the whole world is about struggling for survival, and it's all basically the survival of the fittest. The fittest basically is the one that doesn't succumb to law, that doesn't succumb to the situation, that doesn't succumb to what everybody else is living in terms of the way everything is structured, because according to the survival of the fittest, you become an outlaw, you go against the law. That actually makes you smarter. That basically leads to you surviving and you being in power. And that is really the main idea of atheism and secularism. So suppressing religion and confining religion to being nothing but a fantasy, nothing but a complete myth, and therefore you cannot speak about Jahannam, you should not speak about Jannah because it's all myth, according to an atheist. It's really sad to see that a lot of, I would say, the Muslim children right now who are actually growing up in the West are actually adopting such ideas and being indoctrinated with such ideas without them recognizing that they're actually being indoctrinated with atheism. That is really a myth. That's the reality of what the world we're living in. All right, let's continue. إن الذين كفروا بآياتنا سوف نصليهم نارا كلما نضجت جلودهم بدلناهم جلودا غيرها ليذوقوا العذاب إن الله كان عزيزا حكيما. What does this ayah say? Those that had disbelieved in our verses, in our words, we will nuslihim. The word nuslihim actually means to expose directly on blazing fire. نسأل الله العفو والعافية. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rabbi, protect us from all such torment. In where كلما نضجت جلودهم, every time their own skin would grow again, the Lord Almighty would change and replace their skin with other skin in order to taste more of the torments. إن الله كان عزيزا حكيما. For the Lord Almighty is Aziz. Aziz to mean that He is basically not in need of anybody's worship. In other words, if you choose not to worship the Lord Almighty, well, He's not the one in need of your worship. It is you actually in need of that worship. How am I in need for it? Why would I be in need for it? I'm living just fine. Let me explain it. So, just like we were talking about that you were created with a certain fitrah, part of your fitrah, you would recognize that when you feel hungry, you recognize even a child when they're first born. No one taught them, but they are first born and then they are feeling hungry. They would put their hand in their mouth. That wasn't an information given to them, that was an instinct. And same thing, when a child if a child is to feel pain, even though a newborn child, he would basically cry. Why did he cry, or why did she cry? Well, they cried because that's the way to express pain. Who taught him to express pain? Through making sounds. In other words, it's a way of communication. What was that? Well, when you look at certain information that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created within you, part of that data is not only hunger or fear, but part of that data is your need to worship. A need for me to worship. Yes, the second that you would basically distance yourself from worship, you would find yourself going through another type of hunger, another type of fear, another type of feeling lonely, which is really equivalent to the ayah in Surah Taha, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says that وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. Whoever keeps away or turns away from the remembrance of the Lord Almighty, فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا, then the consequence would be that they would live a life of struggle, a life of anxiety, a life where they're really feeling nothing but lost. And on Judgment Day, they would be resurrected blind. And they would question, why are we blind now? Why were we resurrected blind when at one point we actually were capable of seeing? It's like they're considering that that's not fair. Why would you resurrect us in a different state than the state that we were in? They considered that what would be fair is that, hey, we were in a certain situation, you resurrected us, at least get us the same situation and the same body that we used to be in. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds, you actually had the signs of the Lord Almighty, but you chose to be blind from seeing them. So in other words, the punishment is going to be stemming from really from the same behavior. So now that you recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had instilled within you not only the recognition of probably hunger or probably fear or different things that you would recognize even probably at a later stage, maybe recognizing the need for reproduction, etc. All these different things are one, they're basically things that are within your instinct. But there's an instinct that is that godly instinct, the recognition to worship the Lord Almighty. Right now, in our day and age of atheism really being in control of the world, we're actually not recognizing, and we're being told that speaking about God is supposed to be just really at your leisure time and not of any importance. That's why the legal maxims start out with your deen first, because that's your center. All right, Hakima, we're going to talk about the most wise. Let's see. So this ayah, there's actually a famous, I forgot what his name was, but a famous scientist, he's actually, I think, Chinese. He was doing a study and he was trying to see where the area of feeling pain is. So feeling pain, is it the nerves that feel the pain, or is it the skin, or where really is the area of feeling pain? And this ayah actually led him to Islam, in where the ayah basically says right there that when the disbelievers because of disbelieving, Muslim, they would be exposed on the fire, and every single time their skin would basically burn out from the blazing fire, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would change their skin into a new skin in order to change, to taste. And of course, in Arabic, the word to taste, it's not to taste with your tongue. In Arabic, taste is a lot more comprehensive than tasting with your lips, or, well, you don't taste with your lips, but than tasting with your tongue. Okay. In Arabic, tasting also can be metaphorical tasting, and where you're feeling something so deeply as if you're actually embracing that feeling. That's what tasting is. So you would taste maybe sweetness of a certain feeling. You would taste the sweetness of a certain taste, well, of course, or a certain substance that you would put in your mouth, or probably taste the sweetness of a nice fragrance, or probably the sweetness of a certain feeling. All of that is actually metaphorically considered as tasting. All right. And here, لِيَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابِ, tasting is not only in tasting something sweet, but it could also include tasting something that is bitter, something that is sour, something that is painful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rab, during this day of Ramadan, we ask you to protect us from such an evil consequence and such torment in hellfire. Allahumma ameen. Inna Allah kana azizan hakima. So why hakima? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the one that determined that why you were created, the purpose of your creation that preceded your existence, was basically going to be based on His determination, and He's the one that determines why you were created and where you would be heading, and not the other way around. Every time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about hellfire, Jannah would always be talked about right after or before. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Yet on the other hand, those that would believe and act righteous. And you could see amilu salihat actually means, amilu means to do. Okay. Amanu means to believe. It's not enough to believe, but you also have to put in an effort in action. Amilu salihat, in where you're actually putting an effort in doing certain actions. As-salihat. Now here's the question. This al right here, every time you see al, you're going to ask yourself whether this is what is considered as al-ahdiyya or al-istighraqiyya. What does that mean? So you've got an al, which is an inclusive al, and you also have an al that is al-ahdiyya, in where it's a specific al. So here, amilu salihat would actually mean that they had done the one. It could mean a specific type of piety. In other words, that is defined by the Lord Almighty, and amilu salihat, in where they had also done the various types of good actions. And that's why when you look at, for example, in the pillars of Islam, you would see praying, you would see fasting, you would see giving zakah, you would see hajj, you would see different performances that you would engage in, and so forth. In terms of what does it mean to be a believer, you would have a number of different ayat that would say those that would believe would engage in 1, 2, 3 and actions and so forth, in where this as-salihat would actually mean, if we were to say that it's a specifying al, that would actually mean what is specified by the Lord Almighty and defined by Him as what defines pious actions, what defines ethical, what defines moral, or morality, all right? And it could also be the inclusive al to mean that the person engaged in various actions of righteousness. سَنُدْخِلُهُمْ. Now the word sin, سَنُدْخِلُهُمْ, this is actually for speaking about the future. So if I were to سأقرأ, that actually means I will. So this is talking about something that is prospected, something that is going to happen in the future. Now, isn't that contradicting the word أتى أمر الله فلا تستعجلوه in Surah Al-Nahl? In Surah Al-Nahl, it basically starts out, the verse really starts out, the whole surah starts out with saying, أتى أمر الله. The matter and basically the decree of the Lord Almighty had happened. It came in a past tense verb. How is it that it came in a past tense verb and then it says فَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلُوهَ, and don't rush it? And here we could see سَنُدْخِلُهُمْ, where it's actually talking about a will that is going to happen in the future. So is this the future or is this the past? Are we living in the future or are we living the past? Sorry to take you into some philosophy here, but bear with me. It's actually important. When you look at the ayah, أَتَى أَمْرُ اللَّهِ, yes, it's in the past tense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree had come, in where the purpose that preceded your existence was already determined by the Lord Almighty. Then the Lord Almighty is not confined in time. So your future to the Lord Almighty, since He's not confined in time because He is the creator of time, and therefore, Him being the creator of time, it's equal to Him, the past and the future. But for you, فَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلُوا, but for you, you are living within the structure of time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is here informing you based on your structure, the structure that you were created in, that سَنُدْخِلُهُمْ, that this still did not happen in the future, in where even after time, which basically after Yawm al-Qiyamah, because with Yawm al-Qiyamah, that means the end of time. Okay. But here it's basically telling you, well, after what your definition of time is, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, سَنُدْخِلُهُمْ. Now, the word سَنُدْخِلُهُمْ actually means that it's putting in a determination. We will. There is a certainty. There is a certainty that this is going to happen in the future, that there is no doubt in. So therefore, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that those are different stages in time to recognize. سَنُدْخِلُهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rabbi, include us in that. We will let them enter Jannat. The word Jannah, anything that comes with a jim and a noon together, Jannah actually means hidden. Okay, so jinni, if we're talking about jinn, the hidden creatures, the unseen creatures. Okay, if we're talking about janeen, basically the embryo hidden within the mom's womb, would basically
Subhanallah.
be exactly the jinnoon. And Jannah would be hidden. Wait a minute, is it hidden? What is it hidden from? So the trees, that's why mudahammatan, you would see the Jannah in where the beautiful, oh, I wish I could actually show you the beautiful greenery that I'm seeing out of my window in the beautiful country of Malaysia. Okay. So when you're looking at the greenery in Jannah, it looks like there's an abundance amount of water in Jannah. That greenery is so green that it's appearing in, for some plants, like they're dark green plants. All right, you could say in where it's like dark green plants, and it's amazing how, you know, the description of Jannah, where it would tell you that it's sometimes in some of the descriptions of Jannah, it's talking about it being bright, and in some descriptions talking about it being murky. In murky to mean dark plants, or being light plants, and plants that where the Prophet ﷺ actually said as long as elephant ears. And to be honest, I actually had seen some of these plants here in Malaysia. So huge. I mean, it's a leaf, but this leaf is like so, it's almost, I don't know, it's almost 3 feet and 5 feet big. And that's amazing. The
You have
second I
to
saw
take
it,
a picture. You have to take
I,
a picture and
I
share it with
sure
us.
have to do that. I must admit,
Inshallah.
Malaysia is a beautiful country. It is a beautiful country. The amount of greenery. I mean, yes, Minnesota is beautiful, at least in the summer, not in the winter. Not in the winter. I don't miss Minnesota's winter. Okay. Absolutely not. Man, just remembering Minnesota's winter just takes me into all those traumas in where slipping on Highway 694 and slipping on 494 and slipping in my car actually being, not under my control, is slipping on ice. But anyhow, when you look at Jannah, in where it would describe a lot of that murky colors of some plants, or even the size of those plants, or even where عينان نضاختان, where these beautiful springs of water. Oh man, that is so beautiful. Springs of water just gushing from the ground. Ya Rab, Ya Rab, Ya Rab, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's see, what do we got? Got Amri, Arwa, Julie, or Noura, Latifa, Malaika, and Sister Z, or Sister Zaboon. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let every single person that's listening to our lecture, or probably boring lecture, for quite a long time, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all Jannah. So here, جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار, to actually mean those gardens that actually contain so much of those plants, or so many of those plants, since it's a countable thing, so many of those plants, in where not only does it contain all these plants where they're covering each other, that this plant is coming to that plant and beautifully like that, but there are all these flowing rivers from beneath. خالدين فيها أبدا. And the most important thing is that they'll be there always, living there, and they are going to be immortal. Why immortal? Well, immortal because, anyways, death is going to be brought in the image of a white ram, and then it would be slaughtered. You're slaughtering death. Well, remember, death is actually a creature, according to Surah Al-Mulk. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم. That he actually created الموت والحياة, death and life. In other words, life and death are actually creatures. You may not recognize that because you're actually living within it. And of course, even if you were to get some kind of a pain, you need to see a specialist to help you identify the source of that pain and why you're getting that pain. And of course, for something that is not within our scope of research, which is ruh, there's no way that we could know and be able to dissect whether ruh is a creature or not. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you about the world that you are not capable of recognizing, and telling you, guess what? There's actually a creature living within you that you don't even recognize. There's a creature living within you that's controlling some of your things that you have no control of. Think about you being in control of all your matters. Think again. Well, you could see that right there. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, خالدين فيها أبدا, in where this creature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the power to control your life and death is not going to have the power to be within you anymore, because you're just going to be there living eternally, and you're going to be immortal. That's the most beautiful thing about Jannah, to be honest. I think that's the most beautiful thing, is that you're going to be immortal. And of course, it's going to be living in a place. I think one of the most things that I like about Jannah is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says that وَنَزَعْنَا مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِم مِّن غِيرٍ. I love that ayah so much. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will uproot in their hearts the different animosity that they might have in their hearts. What does that mean? So that actually means X and Y, they both entered or will enter Jannah, or they're going to enter Jannah. But X and Y, they had so much animosity in dunya that they completely hated each other. Well, for someone, they could just think, well, how could they hate each other? They're both good. They both enter Jannah. How can they hate each other? Well, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that there are certain things that we don't know about each other in where al-arwahu junudun mujannada. There's something that you might be walking down the street and for some reason you might find yourself that you just like that person. You don't know why. You just like that person. And subhanAllah, whether it's spirit and whether, there is a hadith where where Allah or the Prophet ﷺ actually says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created the creation before this creation that we're in right now, and where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even in Surah Al-Zumar, says that they will say, رَبَّنَا أَمَتَّنَا اثْنَتَيْنِ وَأَحْيَيْتَنَا اثْنَتَيْنِ. You had created, you had killed, made us die twice and resurrected us twice. You might say, well, how's that? So that's the thing, is that you were actually created before, and this is your second creation. And you were dead before, and now you're back to life. You were dead before, and now you're seeing that there is some information about you that you don't really know. It was actually before time. There's some information about you that just when you thought that your information starts from the time that you started recognizing and storing data in your brain, think again. Just like your children, you would be taking care of your children and you'd be like, well, you used to do this when you were a baby. You used to do this. And they'll be looking at you with all these question marks like, how can you say that about me? I don't recall any of that. It's like, well, maybe there's some information that you don't know about yourself that you really, is it a fact about you? It's a fact about you, even if you don't recognize it, even if your brain was not fully developed yet. So that's where, how did I get there? ربنا أمتنا اثنتين. Why did I get there? Yeah, خالدين فيها. I think what I was saying was, well, the most thing that I like about this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَزَعْنَا مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِم مِّن غِلٍّ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes and uproots the animosity in their hearts. In other words, there are some people that might actually be good, but you don't blend too well with them. Not because they are necessarily evil, but perhaps it's because your souls, before even the creation of time, just didn't blend too well together. You're probably coming from a different piece. At the end of the day, is that just recognize, not because you hate somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're evil. They could actually be going to Jannah too, and same thing. But in Jannah, this person that you might not like actually go to Jannah, and you're like, no, I don't want to be with that person in Jannah. Well, guess what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take away the animosity. This person will be your friend. Be my friend. That's the last person I want to be friends with. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you there'll be different people. There'll be different people. You'll be a different person. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that Jannah, there's no hate. In Jannah, there's no pain. In Jannah, there's no death. Man, that's Jannah. Wow, that's Jannah. All right. لهم فيها أزواج مطهرة. And in Jannah, they will have spouses that are mutahara. Mutahara, clean. Is it clean? Or is it mutahara, pure? So yes, mutahara is pure, but pure from what? Do we actually have azwaj that are not pure in this world? Well, mutahara could be a number of different things. If you were to look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah al-Muddathir, He said, يا أيها المدثر قم فأنذر وربك فكبر وثيابك فطهر والرجز فاهجر. So tahara could be one in an actual tahara. The opposite of the word purity is basically najas or najasa or rijs, okay, or rujz, right? Now all these words, rujz, najas, najasa, all of those are actually the opposite of the word tahara. All right. Tahara could be in the person's garment. The purity could be in their garment. The purity could also be in the behavior. Where could you say purity can be in the behavior? Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember in Surah, believe Hud, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually said about Qawm Lut that they basically found a reason to why they wanted to expel Prophet Lut, and they said because they're seeking innahum, and what did they say? Yatatahharun. They're people seeking purification. So therefore, they were actually not speaking about showering, they were speaking about the behavior itself was actually a behavior seeking purification in where they wanted a man and a woman to get married and not necessarily man and man and LGBT and all that stuff. All right. So that sodomy. Okay. So that was Prophet Lut alayhi salam. So therefore, you look at also in Surah Al-Muddathir, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِرْ, and purify your clothes, وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. And then it continues to explain what does it mean to abandon rujz. Rujz is supposed to be the opposite of tahara. And when you see that the rujz waruz fahjur, just so that you won't think that, oh, I want to stay away from bathrooms and stay away from contaminated areas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, وَلَا تَمْنُنْ تَسْتَكْثِرْ. Well, we're actually talking about a contamination that involves behavior. So whether we're speaking about a contaminated behavior or a contamination in physical contamination, or even let's call it garment contamination, at the end of the day, azwajum mutahara. Some scholars went as far as saying, well, that means there's nothing disgusting that the husband will find in his wife or the wife find in his husband. They're just completely clean, completely beautiful, completely pure, completely good in their morality, completely good in their behavior, completely loving and so forth. وَنُدْخِلُهُمْ ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا. نُدْخِلُهُمْ ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا. The word نُدْخِلُهُم is actually here coming in as an article that is basically نُدْخِلُهُم, meaning that they will be put in where it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the object, and he's the one that would be the one to let them enter ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا. Wait a minute. How did we get into ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا? Because of this ayah right here. Hold on, you'll see it. ظِلًّا actually means a shadow. ظَلِيلًا, this is actually called that in where it's a form of emphasis in Lugha Arabiya. So شربت شربا, أكلت أكلا, ظلا ظليلا, etc. And of course, this type of emphasis, it's in order to bring about not a repetition, but that's the way the semantics in Lugha Arabiya, in where to speak in that way is to emphasize the continuation of such shadow, in where you're not going to be exposed to heat, you're going to find a lot of shadow, you're going to find a lot of coolness, you're going to find it an extensive and a vast and a massive shadow that is keeping you in a cool situation. And of course, let's see right here. So we're talking about, let's see, Jannah. So we're talking about in a garden, we're talking about water, we're talking about, then it's talking about our life, where our health, we're going to be immortal, and it's talking about our company, and we're going to be married. Okay, then it's talking about the environment, and I guess here temperature, the environment, and here talking about the I guess the ecosystem here, and the type of ecology that it's going to be in. ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا. Beautiful. Ya Allah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all this. Allahumma ameen. Let's say, look at here, ظلا ظليلا. What time is it? We got 3 more minutes. إن الله يأمركم أن تؤدوا الأمانات إلى أهلها وإذا حكمتم بين الناس أن تحكموا بالعدل إن الله نعم ما يعظكم به إن الله كان سميعا بصيرا. How did we get from speaking about Jannah to actually speaking about ruling in justice? Let's first explain the ayah and what it is saying. Let's just call it surface tafsir. Your Lord Almighty orders you or commands you to give the trusts back to people, back to its owners. And if you are to rule by people, you would rule up based on justice. For your Lord Almighty would command you of the high virtues, and He is bringing you a reminder of it. For the Lord Almighty is all hearing and all seeing. How did we get to jumping from speaking about Jannah to speaking about trusts? Because of the word, this one, ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا. Who is the one to enter Jannah? Who gets such a provision? Who gets such a reward? There is a hadith that is actually important to say and mention in this. Let me take you to the hadith so you could actually see it and really connect those dots together. All right, and this hadith actually says سَبْعَةٌ يُظِلُّهُمُ اللَّهُ يَوْمَ لَا ظِلَّ إِلَّا ظِلُّهُ. Let's see this hadith and actually scrutinize it, and I'm going to help you, inshallah, see it so you could be able to understand the relationship between this ayah and certainly this hadith. Let's look at this hadith. I love this website, and let's see, I hope they put the hadith. Okay, here we go. So this is the hadith that is relating to the ayah. You could say this hadith is muttafaqun alayh, which actually means it's narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. In other words, the highest level of authenticity in terms of hadith. All right, so let's see this hadith. This hadith is relating to, let's say, relating to the ayah that we were just saying. Remember the word right there, dhil, which actually means shadow. And now this hadith is actually taking as well, who is the one deserving to be in such shadow. So the Prophet ﷺ said, there are 7 that will be under the shadow of the Lord Almighty when there is a shadow, no shadow but the Lord Almighty's shadow. And of course, explains who are these 7. Number 1, Imamun Adil. This is not an imam, a person that's leading in prayer, but this is actually speaking about a leader who is just. Number 2, an adolescent or a young man who basically grew up worshiping the Lord Almighty. In other words, basically abiding by the rules and the laws of the Lord Almighty. Number 3, is this 3? Yes. And a man whose heart is connected to the masjid. This is a metaphor. In other words, their heart is connected to the masjid, not their heart is somehow hung in the masjid. Although, yes, the word here, in Arabic it would be mu'allaq, and where their heart is, hung in the masjid. This is a metaphor. This is not literally hung in the masjid, but this is actually a metaphor to mean their heart is always connected to the masjid. رَجُلَانِ تَحَابَّا فِي اللَّهِ. 2 men that, well, this is 2 men or 2 women, because this was basically the Sahaba were, of course, sitting down, and this was basically talking to them. رَجُلَانِ تَحَابَّا فِي اللَّهِ. 2 men that would love each other for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason they would join together is basically for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why are they joining together? Well, they're joining together because they're trying to organize probably an event for da'wah. They're joining together because they're trying to, collect donations for these poor people. They're joining together to set an event, to probably make a lecture or whatever it is. So this is ijtama'a alayh. The reason why they're connecting together and they're working together is not because they're trying to advance a job, but they actually have for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وتفرق عليه. And even when they would depart, they would leave each other. One is in the state of Virginia, the other one is in Malaysia. Well, but we're still working together for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ورجل دعته امرأة ذات منصب وجمال فقال إني أخاف الله. The other person is basically the man who was invited by a woman, basically for an illicit behavior or some kind of she was trying to seduce him. But this woman was actually considered an elite, and not only an elite in position, but she was also an upper class and probably even an upper stage in beauty. Even though she was the one inviting him to doing some kind of an illicit behavior, but he responds, I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, he didn't fear losing probably the privilege from this woman that is in such a high, probably elite position, or even the beauty, but he basically stood up and said, I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing that is going to get me out of the principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what number is this? Okay. رجل تصدق بصدقة فأخفاها حتى لا تعلم شماله ما تنفق يمينه. So basically, the man that would donate a donation, but he فأخفاها, but he kept it so private when he made the sadaqah that even his left hand does not know what his right hand had donated. This is not literally that his left hand doesn't know, or his right hand, لا تعلم شماله, his left hand doesn't know what his right hand donated, but this is to actually say that it is so private that he didn't even, he just gave it, and it was so private that he didn't even think beyond giving for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ورجل ذكر الله خاليا ففاضت عينه. And a man who remembered, and of course remembered, whether remembered in his tongue, done a prayer, or whether done the dhikr to remember in recognition, remembered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's magnificence, and then his eyes were filled with tears. Took a moment to just embrace the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at that moment, basically his eyes were filled with tears. Of course, someone might say, hey, why is it talking about rajul, rajulan? It's all talking about men. Where's the women in this context? The women are the same thing. Okay, so whether it's two women loved each other for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or a woman that her heart is connected to the masjid, or a young woman who basically is growing up as a religious young girl and then later became an older woman, always in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or whether it was a woman who was invited for, or at least she was somehow trying to get some man that was in such high position and even handsomeness. He was trying to seduce this woman, but she didn't fear anything but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Same thing, you can apply it to the women as well. So this is not exclusive to men, but this is also including women as well. So therefore, this is in order to tell us the people that would get Jannah are the seven, that the ones to also get the dhillan dhalila are really the ones that are higher position, that would be in the ones mentioned in this hadith. And that's why it says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَى أَهْلِهَا. The Lord Almighty orders you to give al-amana. Al-amana, what is al-amana? Well, let's go back to a number of different things here. I already prepared a couple things just for that. So when you look at this hadith, there are a couple of amanas. What is an amana? An amana is a trust. Okay. And when you look at trust, okay, when you look at trust, I basically went and it said that defining trust, so a firm belief in the reliability, truth, or ability of someone or something. And legally, an arrangement whereby a person, a trustee, holds property as its nominal owner for the good of one or more beneficiaries. Well, here, this is very beautifully said, because this exactly is what the different scholars had defined in amana. So right there in amana there's the general meaning and there's the specific meaning of amana. The general meaning is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically said, إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَن يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. I want you to look at this. So this is in Surah Al-Ahzab. We don't remember any of this. Remember, there's some data about you that you don't know about yourself. Let's say. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we had basically introduced al-amana, the trust. What is the trust? So the trust is basically the free will that you were to basically live the principle and have the free will to do or not to do and still abide by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, let your free will succumb to the will of the Lord Almighty. So the skies and the earth and the mountain were introduced to this amana. Would you want to take it? I'll give you that is the free will, and you were to make the decision. So they rejected. So the skies, the earth, and the mountains, which actually tells us that just when you thought that these things are nothing but silent creatures, think again. You may not recognize that this mountain is not a silent creature, but it's actually a creature that determines certain things without you knowing. Anyhow, فَأَبَيْنَ أَن يَحْمِلْنَهَا, and they refused to carry the will or to carry the trust. وَأَشْفَقْنَا مِنْهَا, and they were extremely scared and they absolutely were afraid of taking it. وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ, yet it was the human beings that took this trust, and it is related to the ayah in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember the ayah that we just read earlier, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says in the ayah, وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ بَنِي آدَمَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهِمْ, when your Lord Almighty had taken from the back of Adam the children, وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ, am I not your Lord? And they said, verily you are. And they witnessed upon themselves, and then they basically on judgment day they said, well, we were just pacified. Exactly, that is that ayah. وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ, the human beings, they were the ones that wanted to take the will. I guess they had such confidence, great confidence in their intellect and in their ability. إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا, for man is ظَلُومًا. It is part of their nature in where they carry a lot of transgression, a lot of potential to commit dhulm, injustice, and jahula. They would be so ignorant, but they're so confident in their intelligence that they don't recognize their ignorance. They don't recognize that there's so much in this world that they don't actually have enough information about, but they are so confident in their science, in their brain, in their intellect, that they think they know everything. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, the first trust, and which is the trust in where you were to abide by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, let's see. Here, firm belief in the reliability of truth. Well, this is the first segment of it. Let's see. And Ibn Kathir actually mentioned the terminology of al-amana, and he said, well, all of these words, they don't contradict one another, but they're actually all agreeing that it goes back to the person being accountable and also embracing the orders and the prohibitions based on the conditions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, that if they were to abide by the principles of the Lord Almighty, that they would be rewarded for that. And if they were to leave it, then they would be held accountable. And the one to accept that is basically the human beings for their vulnerability, and certainly because of their ignorance and also their capacity to transgress the limits. Except those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given guidance, or at least except those that would embrace Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance, and by the direction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would be the ones to be included in this. Al-Tabari, Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, I would say he's, it's really sad that many don't actually recognize the importance of al-Tabari. But anyhow, let's get there. And he basically said, well, what is actually meant by the trust or al-amana in all of these cases is really, number one, all the different trusts in religion, in other words, the principle, the religion, and also the trust that people would give you. People would give you a certain trust, and therefore, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not specify what type of amana it is. So, in other words, it's a general, comprehensive term in where it's not to be specified in your relationship with Allah, but it's basically to live the principle, whether in applying the justice of the Lord Almighty in your relationship with people or in a relationship with the principle, the principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Al-Qurtubi, who's actually the scholar that I usually turn to, he actually said, well, the amana is very comprehensive, and it's a comprehensive word to include everything that relates to the religion. And he said, well, this is basically the adopted basically opinion and definition by most of the scholars. And he said, well, this basically would be included in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Mu'minun, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ, describes the believers as those that would live in or up to the trust and even the contracts that they would be making. So amana, whether it's God-given amana, that is what choices you choose in principle, or whether that is the amana in where, hey, it doesn't contradict, because anyways, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked you to abide by justice, asked you to abide by honesty, and asked you to abide by a certain principle. So therefore, you're looking at this piece of it in where it's all included. So let's see. The other more specific term of amana, basically all those different areas in where what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered you to preserve and not basically betray. And those are three different areas. So the first one, here's the first one. Let's look at the first one. The first one is basically, let's look at all these different areas. That's the first one. I absolutely love this Mawsu'a Fiqhiyya Kuwaitiyya. It's in, I believe, 46 volumes. I think 46 volumes. And it is outstanding. So these 46 volumes, they actually have, I hope they would get translated, the huge volumes. It's like a blue copy. And it's I don't know, it's almost a foot. Well, actually a foot and a half in height and in width. Well, it depends on the volume, but it's a great encyclopedia in fiqh. Anyhow, so basically mentioned that it's in three different areas. The first one is in financial rights and financial trust, whether we're talking about contracts or whether we're talking about different trusts that people would give you, or loans, or even mortgage, or even other areas of agreements, contracts and agreements, and so forth. All right. So those are the different areas, and I made it really easy, and I put it right there in where it would be the lease, the loan for use, profit sharing, partnership, agency, partnership, and certainly mortgage. All those are different types of contracts that Islam would consider that there are certain rulings, certain principles on how to ensure, one, that you are abiding by that trust. All right, so those are the different types. Let's go back to our friend right there. The type two, or the type, the other type of wealth, all right, is basically those contracts that you would do with other people. So wadi'a would be a trust, or at least a trust that you would give somebody, or somebody would give you. In other words, they're giving you something in where you would preserve for them, in where you would keep it. And I believe I did actually get the term of trust, and nope, I didn't. So It's not an agency. It's not an agency. Al-wadi'a is not an agency. Or actually it is. Okay. So it's basically when you would give someone something for them to keep for you to a certain time, or at least without appointing a time. This is basically putting something with you to keep for them. All right. And the other type is basically all those different areas that we had just mentioned before, in where whether we're talking about partnership, in where loan in partnership, or whether in applying some kind of an agreement that they would do a certain job and you would pay them for services, or whether it's talking about mortgage agency, all these different areas. So now you know it. The other piece is really حفظ أسرار الناس, preserving people's privacies. You could see this hadith. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri had mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ said, إن من أعظم الأمانة عند الله يوم القيامة الرجل يفضي إلى امرأته وتفضي إليه ثم ينشر سرها. This hadith narrated by Muslim. What does that mean? He said, one of the biggest trusts in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Judgment Day is the man that would expose to his wife, of course, we're talking about intimacy here, but also private things, probably his own wrong behaviors, and where he's living his own life, maybe throws his socks everywhere, or who knows, certain behaviors that would be really within the home. وَتُفْضِي إِلَيْهِ. And she would also expose certain things, but then he would go out and expose her privacies. Well, this is not only for women, but that's the same thing if a woman were to expose her husband's privacies, whether it's private matters to mean intimacy, or whether it's the things that happen at home. This is supposed to be private and not be put as public information. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ goes as far as saying, إِذَا حَدَّثَ الرَّجُلُ بِالْحَدِيثِ ثُمَّ الْتَفَتْ فَهِيَ أَمَانَةٌ. If a man were to say any information or any, of course, words, and then they were to just iltafat. Iltafat actually means to turn, or I guess kind of make a body gesture. فَهِيَ أَمَانَةٌ. Even that body gesture is an amana. So therefore, when we're speaking about if somebody had confined you into something, preserving their information is an amana. The other part is basically that those different responsibilities in terms of what level, what responsibilities, what positions you hold, whether we're talking about public positions or whether we're talking about private positions. So public positions, whether you're working at a government office, you're working at some kind of a company, you're working for someone, etc. All of that is actually supposed to be abiding by justice and certainly abiding by the services that you were asked to do. And of course, including the different, more private trust, in where your trust at home, the trust of what you're supposed to be doing, whether it's waking up, putting sahur for your children, making sure that they're clean, taking the showers, brushing their teeth, all of that, you're basically putting in as an amana. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا ضُيِّعَتِ الْأَمَانَةِ فَانْتَظِرُ السَّاعَةَ. If you were to see al-amana, or the trust actually getting lost, and then in that situation, wait for the last hour. In other words, it's basically a sign of Judgment Day. And they said, كيف إضاعتها يا رسول الله إذا أسند الأمر إلى غير أهله فانتظر الساعة. They said, how is the trust going to be lost at the end of times? And he said, if the obligation or the authority was given to who is not capable of holding it, then wait for the last hour. Whether it's the way that we're seeing leaders right now, basically the dumbest are the right now going to be the ones to lead the society. Those that are probably the biggest thieves are right now considered the ones that are treasurers, and the list goes on and on. So how important is that? Let's look at this hadith. Abu Dharr wanted to be in a position of power. So he said, أَلَا تَسْتَعْمِلْنِي? Would you not assign me Tastamini doesn't mean use me, but this is actually to mean, it's a metaphor to mean assign me to do a particular position, basically, be in a particular position. But the Prophet ﷺ, he basically just kind of gave him like a nudge on his shoulder. And he said, Ya Aba Dhar, oh Aba Dhar, you're actually weak. And it's a trust. And on Judgment Day, it is nothing but a humiliation and nothing but a remorse and a regret, except those that had taken it when they are qualified to take it and implemented the different trusts that it entails. You could see this hadith is in Muslim. So therefore, why would he tell Abu Dhar that? I guess he knew something about Abu Dhar, that he wasn't qualified to hold such positions. In other words, this is important, not because a person is religious, and mind you, Abu Dhar was actually the sixth to become Muslim. So being religious doesn't mean you're qualified to do certain positions. So you could be a great person in your religion, you could be a great person as a scholar, but in administration, you're clueless. That's not because you lack deen. No, it's because your brain is designed differently. And therefore, the Prophet ﷺ tells him, Innaka da'if. Innaka da'if, meaning you don't really have the skill. And this da'if, it doesn't mean that he was weak physically, but it actually means that he lacks the skill to be in a place, in a position of leadership. And that's the same thing. A person can be a great scholar, but a horrible administrator. And a person can be a great religious person, but then they are bad in leading. They don't know how to control the masses. So it's just different skills. Recognizing your skill and what you're fit to do is part of understanding al-amana. And sometimes if you don't know, let others help you know where you belong. Let others help you know where and what potentials you have, to let them help you, especially the salihin around you, to tell you, sorry, but you're not doing the best in administration. I'll let you do the teaching, or I'll let you do probably the public outreach or whatever it is. All right. So you've got that job. You do a great job in that field, but not necessarily in this or that. In other words, this is part of tawasaw bil-haqqi wa tawasaw bil-sabr. This is sisterhood and this is brotherhood. Tawasaw bil-haqq actually means that they would support one another. They would, tawasi, it's like we're supporting one another. We're enhancing one another on truth and on patience, on truth and in patience, in order to get to Jannah. No hard feelings. That's all right. All right. So we'll leave that, inshallah, for tomorrow to continue. And Rabbi yahfadkum jami'an, inshallah. I know there's a lot more to say about this ayah, really, but this is just one portion of it. We're just talking about al-aman. All right. Any questions before we leave? I guess everybody is sleeping. That's all right. All right.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
I know that your husband he studies the history of the Bible and how it's compiled and all that. Does he know when the changes were made for Ismail and Ishaq?
What do you mean the changes made for Ismail and Ishaq?
In the Bible.
You mean the actual name?
Yeah, when they said that there would be like they said they changed the names. Instead of saying Ismail would be sacrificed, they said Ishaq.
Well, even Muslim scholars actually had differences of opinions on whether al-Dhabih, or the one that was sacrificed, was Prophet Ishaq or Prophet Ismail.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, even Muslim scholars actually had differences of opinions. Now, here's one thing, is that the story that was mentioned in Surah Al-Safat, Allahu lil-Jabin, and then all of that story, there's no doubt that that story happened to Prophet Ismail. Okay? It was clear. Okay?
Yeah.
But they had differences of opinions if the order to slaughter the son, whether that was Prophet Ismail or Prophet Ishaq. At the end of the day, regardless of whether it's Prophet Ishaq or Prophet Ismail, it doesn't change. The truth of the matter is that as Muslims, we would regard Ishaq as a prophet and we would regard Ismail as a prophet. So we would revere both prophets regardless. The whole story is really to bring us to recognizing that Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was willing to sacrifice his own son for the order and for the implementation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commandments, regardless of who it was.
Okay, subhanAllah.
So we don't revere Prophet Ismail more than Prophet Ishaq.
Right.
We don't consider Prophet Ismail as more important, just as we don't consider Prophet Muhammad as more important than Prophet Isa alayhi salam. لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله. We don't differentiate between any of the prophets. They're all at the same level in terms of what we believe and how we would revere these prophets. But the Lord Almighty, his position is different. He gets to basically determine which one is considered as ulil azmi min ar-rusul, which are the ones to actually put more effort, and whether that was Prophet Ibrahim, Nuh, Isa, Musa, Muhammad sallallahu, or whether we're talking about one prophet. So some prophets, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would probably hold a higher level, but that doesn't mean that we can do the same. So the Prophet ﷺ actually said that don't overpraise me the way that Christians actually overpraised Isa ibn Maryam. So we don't praise, and he even literally said, don't praise me over Prophet Yunus, which is Jannah. All right? He said, you can't, don't overpraise me even over beyond Yunus ibn Matta. You can't do that. All right? So as Muslims, we would regard all prophets as holding holding the honesty, the virtue, and certainly holding the holiness even of being the ones to basically deliver the message and even be infallible.
Okay.
Be
Yeah,
infallible.
I just had a non-Muslim ask me about that, so I just wanted to ask.
We don't necessarily have that, oh, this is the exact date when it was changed, etc. If you actually go back, if you even go back to, I think what's even more important than, who really was the one to be at the Dhabih, that's not the most important idea. I think in the book Hunting for the Word of God, I think he does an outstanding job in where he exposes the different manuscripts, and most Christians don't really understand and have knowledge about what is actually called the higher criticism or even theology, to know the history of the Bible. And even so, we've got over 5,000 manuscripts. Most people actually think 5,000 manuscripts, they're all really doing the same thing, not recognizing that with ultraviolet rays and all of those, we're capable of actually seeing the manuscript and actually see what was erased and what was changed. and even know the date of those manuscripts. So the dating of those manuscripts, and of course there's something called paleography, I don't know how they say it, but anyhow, so they're capable of actually seeing the date of the manuscript. They're capable of researching what was erased, what was written, and even, believe it or not, even the additions that were actually added within those texts. So that's really interesting, and especially that you would have over 5,000 manuscripts. You're capable of seeing, like, the story. I guess the story that really stands out is the story of that adulterous lady who basically comes to Prophet Isa and had committed adultery, and based on the Jewish scripture, she was supposed to be stoned to death. So she comes to Prophet Isa alayhi salam. They basically mock her, that is the people around him, whether it's the disciples or the other people, and that the Prophet Isa alayhi salam says, well, if any of you is with no sin, he's the one that's going to stone her, because according to Jewish law, if you were to commit adultery, you're going to be stoned to death. All right. So that story, it was not in the previous manuscripts, and it wasn't added until later. And you would even see in that book, Hunting for the Word of God, you would see those manuscripts, and it's not somehow our own intelligence. This is you go to Bart Ehrman, and he would give you all those details of what really happened to those texts. Does an outstanding job, and would highlight those. There's Bruce Metziger, and there's also Bart Ehrman, and of course, well, Bart Ehrman was basically the student of Bruce Metziger, but he basically would go to these manuscripts and highlight those areas, and of course go to those manuscripts and see how this text was later changed in such year, and then later other manuscripts started adding it, and it became this new information that somehow became part of the Bible, and then later it was included in other Bibles, and it became the story, and then you're capable of actually seeing the story of when these additions actually happened, and how these words were actually changed, adopted, or even the stories themselves. You would actually see a whole text, a whole story, just boom, added right to there. You would, it's right there. You could see it on the manuscript. So it's really sad, but go to Hunting for the Word of God. I'm sure you have a copy of it. It is available online, free, and PDF for free. You're capable of actually going to it. I know the language is kind of hard, but it's worth reading.
Alhamdulillah.
وإياكم. We will see you all, inshallah, tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.